So this should be recording. This is my first video in a while. I haven't done a long video in a bit. So it's going to take me a minute to go through everything that I want to discuss today. But the first thing I wanted to mention was if you notice the energy right now, is very powerful. There's like a higher frequency, there's a higher vibration for people that are able to tap into such things or who are sensitive, empathic people. And so right now you're seeing a lot of just energy, just energetic frequency. And so I think for folks who are sensitive to that, they might be struggling and they might be feeling empowered, they might be feeling positive, they might be feeling anxious, but they're definitely noticing an energetic frequency change and tapping into that. And so with that can come some difficulty, right? Because we're being fed this fear narrative. And if you turn on the television, which is maybe this giant, brain mind program that constantly infiltrates our senses and our energetic fields and influences how we feel emotionally, and can really kind of train us and program us into a certain mind state. If you're listening to any of that, it's this huge fear narrative, right? It's this huge onslaught of emotions and fears and scary images and fear of death and just constant barragement of negativity, really. So there's not like a lot of positivity coming our way. And if you just examine it on a basis of alchemy, like spiritual alchemy, this is definitely a time where there's like this onslaught of negative energy. So if you're cooking a pot, you're cooking a stew, and you are adding alchemically a bunch of negativity, you're gonna, increase the negativity. You're trying to create something. And so what's interesting right now is I was reaching out to my friend Monique, and I was reaching out to my boss, and I was reaching out to my sister Sean, and like literally all these people are like, yeah, I'm protecting my energy. Like I'm literally protecting my energetic field right now. I'm not allowing myself to become a victim or be programmed with fear. I'm choosing to be in a place of stillness, or I'm looking at what feeds me right now, like asking myself, hey, what feeds you? What do you need right now? So it's just really interesting to tap into different people and ask them, like, where are you at and how are you feeling and how are you dealing with what's going on right now? And I do find it interesting and positive that some people are taking ownership of their experience. They're taking ownership kind of their energetic field, their energetic bubble. And that's ultimately yours. Like you get to decide what that landscape looks like, right? We all get to decide what we're thinking about or what we're feeling about to some degree. Obviously, there's other exceptions. So another thing I want to talk about was feminism. And I think sometimes people get tired of me talking about feminism because I bring it up so much. And it's one of my favorite subjects because not only do I believe that we're in this time of the divine feminine awakening, but I also am so fascinated by the way that we treat women and the way that we treat men and the way that we don't talk about what our experiences are sometimes out of fear, or that there's a lot of divisiveness that gets created. And so feminism doesn't become like a fun topic to talk about. And I just like want to bring the fun back into feminism and do some stand-up comedy on feminism. And I have a lot of really crazy ideas there, but I'm working on it. But quite humorous for me. I get very excited. So one thing that troubles me with feminism is that you'll see or troubles me in terms of sexism, I suppose, is that you'll see women take down other women, and you'll see women be harder on other women than they might be of men, and they have just been taught to program, like they just have been taught to prioritize men's needs in a way that kind of puts themselves second. And so you'll just see a lot of very subtle things that happen in terms of women's relationships with other women and in group dynamics where women aren't even conscious of putting down other women, and then men are not always conscious of talking more than other women. Like when they've done studies, like academic studies, men will think that they talk less than they actually talk, and men will think that women talk more than they actually talk, and just these very subtle microaggressions that can occur between the genders and in terms of all of that. And I think those things are coming up strong for me right now because I'm trying to take a position of leadership. Like I'm trying to take a stronger position of leadership than I've taken in the past. And I oftentimes feel challenged by the fact that I'm female, and there's a part of me that doesn't really feel like I'm female, that just feels like I'm a human being. And so when I have these experiences of trying to lead and feeling that there's discrimination or things of that nature, that wouldn't be happening if I were male, it just kind of troubles my soul because I feel like I'm genderless. Like I feel like I have to look down and remind myself like what meat package I'm in and just be like, oh, that's right. Like that's why this person is treating me like shit. Like because they think I'm supposed to be like this because I'm in this, like I'm in this suit this time. Like, oh, doesn't sexism suck? Like I just have to remind myself, like because I'm thinking of myself in a genderless state, like why am I having this negative reaction to being someone in charge, like being a leader and being in a decisive role where I'm having to give direction and experiencing resistance with that, and then having to kind of remind my soul, like, oh, sorry, soul, like you're in this female body, and you're just going to have to deal with some bullshit that goes along with like this female body, and it's just kind of a bummer. Like, I just wish that sexism wasn't even real. And it comes up for me right now because I do feel like there is like this divine feminine awakening, and it's for men and women, and men are just as in touch with the female archetype as far as if you look at the history of the divine feminine in terms of the history of the planet and human civilization. So men are craving that as much as women. And you see, like, I have men in my life that are very in touch with the divine feminine and very supportive of women in power, and like they don't feel emasculated by women in power, and they're able to own their own masculinity and also support women in power, and that's beautiful to see. And I feel like I have many male allies out there in terms of my own feminism. But it does kind of tap into this spirit of divisiveness, and I see it like rearing its ugly head. It's like comical. It's like, you pit the people against each other who want to wear masks, and you pit the people against each other who are like Black Lives Matter, and you pit the people against each other that like subscribe to the idea that 5G is like totally sus, and then you pit the people against each other who believe that Bill Gates has a vaccine agenda basically to off, half the population or something. Like you just keep like pitting people against one another. Like it's brilliant, because you just keep them all like the crabs in the pot just fucking fighting like all the time. So as you see this divine feminine start to happen, and you see this like war between the genders start to heat up, because heaven forbid the divine feminine could just be allowed to just come into existence, right? And we just celebrate women and celebrate female empowerment and support women and support little girls growing up not to feel like they have to take care of anybody, like support little girls in owning their own bodies and not having to be in positions where they're forced to give hugs to sleazy people like Joe Biden. Like it's just amazing to me that that we make women like learn so young to apologize for conflict and not be comfortable having conflict, and always be apologizing for having ideas or opinions. Like, I'm sorry, here's my idea, or I apologize for having a differing opinion. And it's like, I just think that there is a beautiful opportunity here if we celebrate the positive. There's a beautiful opportunity here to celebrate the awakening of the divine feminine. That is for sure. And men and women are on board with that, like hands down. So it's not a gender thing at all, because there are women that are definitely not down with the divine feminine. They are fighting it tooth and nail. They're full on bought into the patriarchy and hating their sisters, like full on. They're card carrying members of the sisterhood hating club. So, you know, good luck with them. But anyway, okay. So a large part of my message, I think, is don't fall for the agenda. Like, don't fall for the agenda of fear. Don't fall for the agenda of divisiveness. Like, how I deal with capitalism, or whatever you want to call it, whatever construct you want to call this, we are the paupers in the field. We are the serfs. Like, we're the serfs. And just so we're clear, like, the Bernie movement had a lot to do with this, because I don't think the powers that be really want people waking up to the fact that there's such a class warfare, like, awakening and scenario coming afoot. I think that that's being deliberately suppressed, that whole movement, whether it's voter suppression. I mean, you can just go down multiple rabbit holes on the suppression of the Bernie movement, if you will, but just the whole idea of people waking up and being like, it seems like we're getting fucked like every election cycle, and none of these people in power actually do anything, and they all have like corrupt insider trading going on, and like it seems like we're getting fucked, and like nothing ever changes. But like, no, we're not going to have a revolution, because heaven forbid we have a revolution. Like, I think we'll go back to drinking our fluoride water or watching Netflix. Like, it's just fascinating to me, like what people are willing to entertain, right? Like, they're willing to entertain maybe a little bit of the rabbit hole, but not like multiple rabbit holes. Anyway, so here you have capitalism, or whatever you want to call it. And the first thing that capitalism does, or whatever the system does, is it teaches you to hate yourself, right? Like, the first thing it does is erase your sense of individuality. Like, you go to school and you're a number, and you get a social security number and you're a number, and you're taught to conform, and you're taught to want to be liked. Like Facebook, it's all about wanting to be liked, right? Like, wanting to be accepted, wanting to be adored, wanting to be popular. Like, heaven forbid you're unpopular, right? Heaven forbid you're unliked. Like, that's everyone. Like, the first thing they teach you is like, don't be the freak that no one likes. Like, don't be the one that no one likes, and all this other stuff. So that's the first thing that they teach you, right? Is that your validity, your worth only matters if other people like you, right? Only if you're socially acceptable, only if you're palatable. Heaven forbid you're unpalatable, right? That's just asking for it, right? So there's just like this degree of conformity. You just have like this small section where you're allowed to be who you are, right? And so we're not really kind of allowed to get to know our central essence of like who we really are, right? Um, you know, I think we are, like, maybe if we go on like an ayahuasca journey or something like that. But as far as like main programming, like mind programming, early capitalism, like, this is a consumer, right? We're all just a consumer in the making. Like, if you can just see yourself as being someone's cash cow, like, that's what we are on an economic level. And then right now in China, there's the I forget what it is, but it's like the social credit score, and that's, I saw some video recently where they said like basically that's where the U.S. is headed as well. Is like, you're going to have a social credit score based upon your your compliance, your behavior. And I know that that seems far fetched for some, but I think it's really difficult sometimes for people to use their minds and connect the dots. So let's see. So the biggest fear for capitalism, or whatever this system is if you love yourself. Like, that's like the most revolutionary act that you can make as a human being in this system. Like, when I try to tell people, when they ask me for advice about what I think they should do, like, what is an act of um, defiance or retaliation or positivity or something, like, what can you do when you're feeling powerless? The biggest thing that you can possibly do is love yourself. The biggest thing you can possibly do is love your dysfunction, love your fucked upness, love every aspect of yourself, and love it with like brazenness, and really say, like, to people, like, I love myself, right? Because we're taught in this culture that that's narcissistic, but yet we worship, like, people in the media who love themselves, right? So it's just such a fucking mind fuck, because we're taught it's selfish and narcissistic to love ourselves, like, too much. Like, you can love yourself, but just, like, don't love yourself too much. Like, go to a self-help workshop to learn to love yourself, but don't come back loving yourself, like, too much, because, like, no. So I do think it's interesting that people get very offended sometimes when you openly admit that you love yourself. When someone's like, you're great, or you're awesome, or you're a genius, or you're so smart, and you're like, I am a fucking genius, thank you, or I do love myself, or something. I think people are just like, they're trained to just be taken aback by that, because you're supposed to have humbleness, right? Like, that's another thing that they love to teach you, is humbleness, which is interesting. To have humbleness in the face of looking at your values and your strengths. Um, I don't think that you have to divorce yourself from humbleness as you love yourself. I think that that's kind of a misconception around the concept of humbleness as like a Calvinistic Christian virtue, if you will. But don't get me started on Calvinism. Okay, so the most revolutionary act that we can do is love ourselves. The first thing they do is destroy your self-esteem, because when you think about yourself as a consumer, you need to teach people that they're fat. You need to teach people that they're old. You need to teach people that they're ugly. You need to teach people that they are missing something, that they're missing something intrinsically. And they're missing it like from the moment that they're born. Like, basically you're training this little micro consumer as you're growing them in this society of consumers that you're using as like your cash cow if you're like the 1% or something. Like, the first thing you're going to do is want to destroy someone's self-esteem, because you want to make them need something, right? So we're all lonely, right? And we're all seeking love and validation and romantic love, or just all these things. But you want to create an emptiness in somebody. You want to create the concept that they're not enough on their own. You want to create the concept that they are missing something, the missing piece. Everyone is just struggling for that missing piece. If they get the right job, if they get the right person, if they get the right whatever, they'll have that missing piece, right? So you want to create an absence of something. So you want to create the sense, and I think religion, especially Christianity, is really good at doing that. But in terms of you want, like, the whole concept of original sin, like, you've already sinned, like, you've already fucked up, like, hey buddy, I know you just came out of your mom's vagina, but like, by the way, you happen to like already kind of owe a debt, you already have like bad credit, like, you've already got something you fucked up on. Like, it's crazy because children are innocent and beautiful, and they've done nothing, and their souls have done nothing. So the idea that you automatically are missing something or needing something, it's all kind of this giant mind fuck. So the idea, though, is to destroy people's self-esteem, but not enough to like really destroy too much of the population, because you need some people like on mass meds and taking up space in psych hospitals and jails, but you also need people to kind of like run the system, right? So you want to keep people operational enough to like to be a cog in the wheel, basically, and consume, because like you need consumers. Like, that's a big part of it, is the consumers coming up. So when people ask me like what my advice is, like, not that I'm a spiritual guru by any means, but I do tend to give a lot of advice. When people ask for my advice, the first piece of advice I give is to love ourselves, like love ourselves completely with all of our imperfections and all of our chaos and all of our self-doubt and childhood wounds and projections and sabotage, my personal favorite. So loving all aspects of ourselves, holding our injured child and being like, poor baby, I love you so much. And, really giving love to that aspect of ourselves that, will remain wounded, will be part of who we are, I believe, the rest of our time in this vehicle, But then the second piece of advice that I like to give people is to really cultivate diversity. And what I find a lot is that in this culture, because there's so much division that's constantly being perpetuated between groups and between ideas and between people who have different concepts of things, and just politically trying to keep people fighting and so forth, that there is there's a counter to that, which is, what if we are to cultivate diversity? And in diversity, like when I'm with my friends that are huge Black Lives Matter people, and when I'm with my friends that are like Microsoft people, and when I'm with my friends that are homeless, and when I'm with my friends that are severely mentally ill, and when I'm with my friends that are doctors at the ER here in Seattle, like I'm getting different impressions from everyone, right? Like I'm getting a different impression from the gay guy who's a conservative, and then the Trump supporter who's Native American, right? Like I'm getting tons of different perspectives, but I'm also keeping my mind alive, right? Because I'm keeping my heart open. I'm open to everyone. I'm not going to discriminate against you because you have a different political view than me. I mean, I might think like you're stupid or something, but like I'm not going to stop talking to you. I'm going to continue to try to have a conversation. And I think what we've been taught in this culture is to be very reactive. So as soon as we hear that someone's a Trump supporter, or as soon as we hear that someone believes that vaccines are sus, like we just shut down and we don't actually stay open to the conversation at all. And there's almost like this weird automatic reaction. Like someone will be like, oh, they're a Trump supporter. Like, I'm not going to talk to them. I'm just going to dismiss every other idea they have, every other thought, every other feeling, when there's just like this one aspect of who they are that is causing this block for you. So I believe that disinformation is out there. So you'll see stuff out there like, oh, people believe that 5G causes the coronavirus. And it's like, well, I've seen a lot of other different theories about 5G that maybe relate to the coronavirus, but are not suggesting that there's like this correlation in this very simplified manner that is tossed out there, like these conspiracy people are completely batshit, right? But it's very interesting to me that you'll see these people within the conspiracy world, and there's so many of them. And because I study them, I feel like I can um, give some feedback on the fact that there's not just like one conspiracy world out there, there's like 100. Um, that it's so important to stay open. It's so important to look at other sources of information than mainstream news. It's so important to look at what people are talking about on Twitter, and look at what people are talking about on Instagram, and just in different like conspiracy websites. And um, I think it's interesting when we're told not to look at something. I think this government is interesting in that it's like, please don't look at this. And if you do look at this, we're going to tell you, like the WikiLeaks thing, they were like, this is illegal to look at John Podesta's emails. And it's like, CNN literally said it was illegal to look at John Podesta's emails. And I know a lot of people just don't want to go down the John Podesta WikiLeaks rabbit hole, and that's fine. But I kind of feel like it's our civil duty to go down that rabbit hole. But that's just my personal opinion. So my point here is that disinformation is out there, and disinformation can come from lots of different sources. But sometimes, believe it or not, ideas get discredited by having someone who's out there to put forth an idea, but to put forth an idea with a little bit of truth and a lot of crazy. And so you have these people that put out these ideas. I don't know, I'm trying to think of just some of the main like conspiracy guys. Like David Wilcox, like, you know, I don't know. Just saying. Um, some of these people seem to have there's the possibility that they're part of like a disinformation campaign, and I think that gets like very complicated and deep for people to think about in terms of like, wait a minute, you're saying like this conspiracy theorist is part of a disinformation campaign? And I'm like, yeah. And I know that it's easier just to watch like straight CNN and kind of accept this paradigm or this reality as like one reality. And then to try to go down the David Wilcox rabbit hole is like a whole other reality. And I recognize that for a lot of folks in my life, this is very hard. Like my father and my sister, and other people in my life, like I can see them struggling with a shifting paradigm. I can see them struggling with, like, there's option A, B, and C and D, right? And I think a smart person looks at all five, right? Like the local economy gets destroyed, the nation's economy gets destroyed, possibly it was economically destroyed for a reason, like purposely destroyed. Perhaps the virus is not as severe as originally we were told, and then you have to ask why. So I just think it's important to like keep asking questions and keep researching different possibilities. And where I struggle with people in my own personal life is that I like to examine different ideas. I like to examine different possibilities. I like to really look at, what are the implications of different theories, and really examining different theories of like what's really going down if you go down some of these rabbit holes. And it's just interesting to see the resistance. And so what I ask people to do is cultivate diversity first. So have people in your life who challenge you. Don't walk away from tough conversations. If someone disagrees with you about the virus or about Bill Gates or about vaccinations or about 5G, like try to stay in that conversation. Try to be present and breathe and be open to new ideas, and challenge your preconceptions. Like it's so important that all of us stay active and stay participatory in challenging um, our preconceptions, and I think some of us are able to conceptualize multiple realities at the same time. Like when what's his face? Stephen Hawkins talked about his last paper before he died. It got published posthumously or whatever that word is, but like that paper talked about multiverses, right? Which is kind of like the concept of multiple timelines or multiple universes that actually kind of exist, kind of stacked on top of one another, and then potentially like bleeding into one another at one point or another. And it just has lots of implications there, especially when you look at black hole stuff. But some people are like comfortable with that. They're like, oh my God, there could be different timelines that are happening right now, and people coming from the future that are coming back now, and there could be glitches in the matrix because of this, or aliens could be us in the future and they've come back to visit and we're just too stupid to realize it because our brains are so small and functioning at such low capacity. And maybe dolphins are the smartest animals on this planet, which is my personal theory right now. Just something about dolphins. But it's just interesting to me that some of us are able to be like, okay, this doesn't scare me. Like I can look at this idea and this idea and this idea and this idea and this idea, and like maybe plant medicine is part of it. Like maybe plant medicine consciousness is waking up, and that's part of like the whole decriminalize movement, and the fact that all over the world people are waking up to psychedelic like Renaissance times, and isn't that interesting? Because that was like the 60s, and then we had so much come out of that before it got like squashed by Nixon and his thugs, like, so wouldn't it be interesting if like now we're about to enter a psychedelic renaissance? And what if the plant medicine itself has its own spirit, and that's part of this greater consciousness and awakening, but we don't even realize it because our brains and our spirits and our souls don't function on the same dynamic as plant medicine energy, or the spirit of plant medicine. So I just think that there are some of us that can conceptualize multiple realities simultaneously, can connect dots and say, oh, isn't this interesting that this happened, and then this happened, and then this happened. And we don't take it on as like an absolute. Like when people ask me, what do I personally think? I'm like, oh, well, it could be this, or it could be this, or there's this, and then there's this. Because I like to gather information. I like to consider information. The other thing I wanted to mention, other than, okay, so with resistance, when resistance comes up for us, when we see ourselves becoming resistant to something, right? This morning I was talking to a friend on the phone, and I wanted to send her this video, but I felt like she wasn't going to be open. And then I talked to her about it, and she said she wasn't open. And then I sent it anyway, and then she told me she watched it. Who knows? And who knows if she was open, But the fact that what I would ask people to do is when they're meeting with resistance, when they themselves are able to be conscious enough to go like, huh, I'm just like automatically resistant to this idea. Like, let me just pause for a moment and look at that resistance. Like, what is that resistance about? Why am I feeling resistant? Do you know what I mean? And let's just like take a moment of homage to like resistance itself. Like, why are we resistant to considering the idea that Bill Gates like isn't the nicest guy in the world, right? Like, why are we resistant to that? What, what is it about Bill Gates that we're sold on him? Is it CNN's take on Bill Gates? Like, where have we been? Where are we challenged to consider something opposite than what we are cultivating as our view? Because I think we become very, when they talk about identity politics, we become very, consumed with like, this isn't who I am. I'm someone who believes in this, and it becomes very, rigid. And why do we believe in that? Like, you know, um, so I believe this is like a very deep time spiritually, a very profound time spiritually. For those of us who are in touch, we see a lot of rise of just energetic frequency stuff. Like, it just feels like the energy is pretty crazy. And then on top of that, there's been like a lot of synchronicity for a lot of us, a lot of deja vu for a lot of us, a lot of remembering dreams for a lot of us, a lot of things coming up. And for me, it feels like karma stuff is coming up a lot. Like, I'm feeling really faced with having to look at my own shit. And I don't think I'm the only one. Like, I feel like a lot of people, if they're awake enough, if they're present enough, they're actually having to look at their own shit right now, which I think is interesting because I like to pay attention, like just on the ether, like to the like static, the frenetic frequency of the universe, like as far as like just the general energy. And for me, it does feel karmic. It does feel like right now we are being given spiritually the opportunity to really look at our deepest selves and see where our deepest selves are. Like, are we where we wanted to be? Why are we here? Why did our soul manifest now at all times? Just a lot of synchronicity afoot, like meeting people that you feel like, oh my God, I feel like I was supposed to be connected to this person. I feel like I was supposed to have met this person, right? So just a lot of that like soul connection kind of stuff coming up. But I do see a lot of people struggle with like a paradigm shift, like my sister and my dad just like kind of clinging to like everything's going to go back to normal, and everything's going to go back any day now, and things are great, and don't be negative, and you're just like, okay, that's okay if that's where you're at, just think we might be in economic free fall. It's a system that's being crashed on purpose, and you might want to ask some bigger questions. But um you know it's also interesting to me that people perceive that as negative. Like, they want a big, fat, happy sticker, like smiley face sticker stuck on all of this stuff. Like, having these conversations that are uncomfortable, questioning the narrative, questioning the behind the scenes stuff, questioning who has power in this whole shit show, questioning, where this is all headed, asking any questions really is considered negative. Like, we're almost taught to question any kind of real deep thought. We're taught to not have conflict, to avoid hard conversations. And that's all just really fascinating to me because I'm not having a negative experience when I'm sharing that I have a concern, or I have a thought, or I have a question, or I have a theory, or I'm sharing a theory. Like, I'm actually quite happy and feeling okay about it. And I'm not depressed. And so it's just interesting to me that that is like put in this category of like, you're being really negative and stuff. And it's like, I think asking questions is positive. I'm sorry that you experienced that as negative. Like, I think asking questions and challenging our paradigms and challenging our thought process and challenging what we believe and what we've been taught and why we've been taught what we've been taught. I think that those are all good things. Um, so it's interesting astrologically, not that anyone asked, but my chart is like, I feel like I have the chart of Cassandra from the Greek myths. And for anyone who's not familiar with like Cassandra, but basically it's like that whole Helen of Troy narrative. And like Cassandra, of course, like refused to have sex with Zeus or something completely sexist. So she was punished for being a strong woman. kind of like Lilith, in terms of like standing up against the man. So she told Zeus no. So she friend zoned Zeus, and then she got her ass kicked and handed to her because she basically was banished to a life of always seeing what's going to happen and then having no one believe her. And then they hate her as like a witch. It's more of like that witch hating, like when you think of how many witches were burned in Europe, a travesty to this day when you think of all the souls that were murdered. But I digress. It's generally that general witch theme, right? The strong woman, the Lilith figure that we have to put in her place. So Cassandra could see the future, right? And so she was cursed with being able to see the future, but then having no one believe her, and then people hating her because she was right. And so basically a shitty life. And if you can't laugh, I don't know, you have to laugh. So there's something in my astrological chart that specifically speaks to this, where I'm like just kind of like cursed with like being misunderstood and not being understood correctly, or being resented, or I don't know, something to this effect. And I know that there are people out there that are like, well, that's bullshit, and you're letting your chart dictate your life or something, and like that's completely valid. Like I don't have a problem taking in that information and considering it as well. Like I try to be very open to all possibilities, but that does resonate with me because a lot of times I feel like I'm giving people feedback about what I think is happening, and then it just feels like it falls on deaf ears a lot of the time. So my thoughts there are that spiritually, I think we all have to face our karma, and I think that we all have an opportunity in facing our karma, whatever that might look like. Like for me, I'm saying I feel like I'm Cassandra from the Greek myths, and no one believes me, and I'm just cursed with being misunderstood or something. But what happens when we get past that? Like what happens when we kind of accept our karma and we learn to work with it, and we learn to work with it from a place of patience and humor and acceptance, right? Like, so it's just interesting when we can be in a place of resolution, or just radical acceptance of what our karma is. Do you know what I mean? I feel like a lot of times in our lives we fight our karma, right? We fight it, and we don't look it in the face, and we don't kind of own and acknowledge our actions from our past lives, and so a lot of times I feel like there's an internal war our entire lives with our karma. But what if we made friends with our karma, basically, or just radical acceptance. Instead, a lot of times I feel like when things don't work out for some of us in life, we can become very fixated on our story, our defining of ourselves as victims, as having life not work out for us, because the whole dream that we're sold, and again, back to the capitalism, the whole dream we're sold is like true love is available for everyone, but maybe it's not, maybe it's not in this life for you, and that sucks, but like, maybe it's not. And so we're just sold all this Disney shit like our whole lives, especially like little girls with like a prince coming to save you bullshit. I'm still waiting. I'm just kidding. So I just kind of want to end there in terms of saying folks are going through a hard time, yes, but there are some of us who are not, right? Like there are some of us who are not buying into the fear narrative and are seeing things for like clearly what's going on, maybe a little bit more than others. And I just kind of wanted to end with, I'm sure I didn't hit on everything, but so this morning I had a text message with my friend, and I had sent her a video. And it was this gematria video, right? And I struggled with sending it because I'm Jewish, and it has like some anti-Semitic aspects to it, but the guy doesn't think it's anti-Semitic. And where I am with that is like literally there was so much in this video that was literally worth considering and looking at. that I was able to say this part of the video I'm wanting someone to listen to and educate themselves about as far as like a possibility. Um, and because I'm just so generous with like, oh, I'll listen to this thing even though it's alt right, and I'll listen to this and it's alt left, and I'll listen to this and it's very sexist, or I'll listen to this and it's very classist, and like I don't necessarily, just because there's a portion of this video that I had sent to her that definitely has some anti-Semitic overtones. I definitely debated like whether or not to send that to her, but for me, I'm able to kind of separate that and just take the information that was helpful for me. And I think that more of us should be able to do that. We should be able to challenge ourselves to take in different information that challenges us in our, we don't want to listen to racist shit. We don't want to listen to anti-Semitic shit. We don't want to listen to hate and things that create more divisiveness. But sometimes we need to expose ourselves to some portion of some information, and by virtue of exposing ourselves to it, we're going to get a little piece of some other stuff that isn't going to resonate with us. That's going to feel like garbage. Um, but I just try not to be reactive. I try to be like water and just let it all just flow over me, and then just be in a place of peace and resonate with it, and so forth. But again, it's very humorous to me that I have so many friends that are just like, well, I think you've been like watching too many videos. And I'm just like, okay, but I don't think I've been watching too many videos. And also, I appreciate them and love them so much for caring and for being worried about me watching too many videos. But also, like, I think people think that I'm like more depressed about these life circumstances or the world that we're living in now than I actually am. Like, for those who actually know me, I actually make fun of this stuff like quite a bit, and I'm generally not feeling bummed out about the circumstance of the world right now. Like, I'm feeling positive and optimistic, namely because I have this one friend, Russell. Like I can't even begin to explain my rationalization for why I trust Russell, because it's not based on anything that like really like holds up in a court of law. But I do enjoy his positivity right now. He has a lot of positivity about what's going on. So anyway, I had sent this video to my friend, right? The video that had the anti-Semitic aspects, but was really worth watching. And she said, hey, if you encounter info about what we can do to offset or remedy this situation, if or when these things would occur, that would be great, right? So she's asking for what she needs, right? Which is great. And then she decides to continue to extrapolate on her first message. So her second message is, that's about the type of info I'm willing to take in at this point. So she's setting a boundary, right? Like, unless you got something positive for me, like, I don't know, just don't send it my way. Unless you've got a course of action, right? And I'll send her this video. So that'll give her like, love yourself, cultivate diversity, and then the last message. So she's like, that's about the type of info I'm willing to take in at this point. I already get that the system is failing, always has been. I hope it burns to dust and the people liberate themselves from looking up and out for some kind of authority to save them, and look towards each other as their brother and sister, and create a world that is loving, that looks after the earth and each other in balance. So beautiful, right? And the thing is, I'm not anti this. I'm like, that sounds great. And then she said, money is not real, the system is not real, but the love that dwells within the hearts of each woman and man is real. Some have just forgotten. So I thought that that was beautiful. And I responded, waking people up is the first part. Watch the video and share it. And she said, okay. And then I sent her another one, and I said, this one might be easier for you to swallow. Just because I'm conscious of like where people are at. And some folks, it's really hard for them to move from a place of, my government loves me and trusts me, or is trustworthy, my government doesn't have it out for me, my the system is on my side, the system makes sense, everything they say is true, everything they say is false. Like, it's really hard for folks who, I don't want to say that they're normies, but like, um, it's just really, really hard for them. I see them really, really struggling right now. Like, where I actually see the most challenges for folks that are struggling, like on average right now, is folks that are, you know, they need the paradigm to make sense. They need the CNN is always telling the truth. They don't want to look at who owns CNN and, you know, how the media is controlled. They don't want to ask bigger questions. They just want to accept that everything is as it says on this TV that makes noise and blares things at them, and they want to believe that what it's blaring is truth. That is their comfort zone, and that's where they need to be. And if you ask them to shift in their consciousness, like really quickly and dramatically, like this whole explosion is kind of asking them to do, because they're some part of them, you can just sense it. Some part of them is like, this just doesn't seem to line up, or this is definitely something's going on here. You know, there is an aspect of them that you can see spiritually wrestling with this, right? And just for those of us who like pay attention to a lot of this stuff like behind the scenes for years now, I think it's really hard to just be in a place of compassion and mercy for those folks, and just recognize like, oh my God, yeah, this must be really hard for you. Um, the other day, my sister asked me, and this is like my total normal, you know, whatever, normal sister. My other sister's so abnormal. But my normal sister was like, "Can you just break down like the top four conspiracies?" And then and I was like, "She's never asked me for any conspiracy information like ever. This is so weird. Like this for me, this is like the paradigm. Like something is happening because now my sister is asking me for information she never has before ever. It's just super weird." So I was like, "Well, here's like the top four conspiracies," and then she's like, "Well, which one do you believe?" And I was like, "I'm open to all of them." Like I I'm open, you know? Like I think people have me wrong in that they think that I'm like in one boat or another, and I'm just constantly open. Um and she somehow didn't find that reassuring. She kind of wanted me to have like one set thing. But I don't. Um I did post an earlier video in my Plant Gods group that I run, about psychedelic medicine and so forth. It's on Facebook, but I did post in there that I had gone in to do ceremony, um, and I just feel like mushroom spirits are such that they don't, like, our problems are not their problems, and our um, our languages are so different. Um, and I mean, I feel like their intelligence is so uh, unparalleled compared to ours, and different, you know, just kind of like when you look at plant cells versus human cells, you know, how one is square. I think it's the plant cells that are square. Yeah, and ours are round. We have round cells. So I just feel like it's like language like that. Like they're doing their plant language and it's like in blocks or something, and ours is like in round bubbles. So it's hard sometimes to get the message. But the only message I could get from them, because they're like tricky little fuckers, you know, like in Mexico, and they've got like these pyramids that are devoted to mushrooms, mushroom spirits. Like they saw them as like the little helpers, you know. I just think of them as like little sprites that are just getting distracted by the light and running all around, and you can't pin them down to get an answer. But the one answer I got from them, other than to trust them, which I'm working on, um, was that they said enjoy the shit show, right? And that was like the one message I got after, you know, hours, was enjoy the shit show, which I thought was really kind of beautiful in a way. Yeah, I think it's really cool when we can be in chaos, but be in this beautiful place of acceptance and embracing the beauty of it, and being conscious of our own higher power, and be aware of our own spiritual voyage and what's being handed to us like spiritually and energetically at this time, um, and to take ownership and to take power of our experience. So I think it's fascinating, just that whole idea of enjoy the shit show. it felt for me like enjoy it, like have fun, and I don't think that's the message that we're getting from the TV right now, right? Like we're not getting this message of have fun. But like what if we were to have fun? Like what if we were to be happy now? What if we took back control over the happiness narrative and we insisted that we're going to have like a party and be happy? Like we refuse to be sad. We refuse to be scared. We're going to like fucking have a joyride. We're fucking blissful. We're going to like live in optimism and excitement and positivity. I just think that that's like the ultimate anti-capitalist or whatever new world order or whatever the fuck they're trying to do. Like that's ultimately like some of the best thing that we can do, but also have conversations, like have tough conversations, and also encourage people to ask bigger questions and encourage those close to you who are uncomfortable to maybe look at their resistance. And you can phrase it as gently as you need to, but I think all of us need to hold space for one another. And instead of putting down your conspiracy friends for their 5G philosophy, maybe try to have some patience and kindness and try to open yourself up to their perspective, and question any movement that teaches you to hate other people. So if the movement is hate everyone who's anti-vax, maybe ask yourself, why am I being taught to hate everyone who's anti-vax? That could be my neighbor or my friend or my cousin. Like maybe ask yourself, what would be the point of being taught to hate other people? Like there's really no point to hate other people. Like we don't need to hate one another. Like that's not what the world needs. The world does not need more hate. And I think the biggest anti-capitalist, anti-new world order, whatever agendas afoot, like the biggest thing we can fight back with that not only is self-love, but loving each other, and sometimes loving one another is not just peace and light. And that's where I struggle with like the hippie community, for lack of a better word, like the new age community, because I struggle in the new age community for several reasons, but one being a lot of times like in the plant medicine community, folks aren't willing to look at entitlement or sexism or racism or colonization or indigenous people's rights or what have you. And I think they're all intersecting, and that we can have these tough conversations, and they don't need to be like defensive and angry. They can be beautiful, and they can be helpful, and we can support one another in hearing each other's voices in respectful ways. Um, and so I think anytime we are conscious that we are putting down others and what kind of energy that is, because I currently like on Facebook and so forth, I'm seeing all these people from the um, thank you plant medicine community who seem pretty hip and seem pretty cool, and they're literally hating on all these people that are believing in the 5G conspiracy, like maybe without even educating themselves about what the concerns are about 5G. Like they're just like running with this hate mantra, and putting out these very black and white statements around the 5G conspiracy being bullshit. When, I mean, are they experts in radiation? Are they experts in the impact of radiation? Like, I don't know. When did they become a fucking expert on fucking radiation? I don't know. They seem to be on Facebook all the time, but apparently they've taken a fucking radiation class. Sorry. It's just annoying. But the point is that this, like there's something that gets cultivated within capitalism where it's like a hyena mentality. It's like you see the fallen gazelle and everyone wants to jump on top of the gazelle. Like they teach you to hate certain people. They teach you to hate the anti-vaxxer. They teach you to hate the conspiracy theorist. They teach you to hate the 5G person. Like, but what about the day you wake up and you realize like 50% of your friends are fitting into all these categories, and you're like, huh, well, like I'm basically being taught to, again, separation. Again, let's separate people, right? Let's keep them separated and hating each other. Like there's a kind of a common theme happening here. Let's cultivate this sense of aloneness. Let's cultivate a sense of normalcy and patriotic. If you're a patriot, you'll wear your mask and will just keep cultivating this sense of, pressure to conform, right? It's the pressure to conform for the greater good. It's the patriotic duty that you have to conform for the greater good. That's going to be kind of the narrative right now. And just important to look at that what comes up for us. It's like Hunger Games. It's like Lord of the Flies. What comes up for us when we, kill Piggy? Didn't they kill Piggy in Lord of the Flies? I think that was always very traumatic for me, but I know that they smashed his glasses. But like, I just feel like whether we realize it or not, like we're being almost like created. Sorry, I'm digressing. I'm just thinking about if it was Ralph that killed Piggy, but I don't know. It feels like Fahrenheit 451 more and more. And I don't know if many of you have read Fahrenheit 451, but there's at one, the whole premise of the book is that books become illegal. Thinking becomes illegal. People thinking for themselves becomes illegal. People having ideas and getting together and gathering in groups becomes illegal. And people sit at home and they watch these screens. And if you're lucky enough, you get to have like a screen on each wall of your living room, and literally you're handed a script and everyone stays at home and they're part of like these online scripts on the computer in their homes, and then no one goes out and they're all at home with like their false like digital AI family basically. So it's feeling a little bit like Fahrenheit 451 these days. But one thing I did notice, and I'll just end here, the other day was I noticed the energy here for me was like at a certain energetic frequency. Like the house with a certain number of people in it had a certain energetic frequency. So like if you can just picture like some kind of energetic spectrum, and wherever the house was with the people in it at that time, that's where the energetic frequency was. And then we had some people over, right? Like broke quarantine. Like, oh, well, when you go to the grocery store or the convenience store or the hospital, you're also breaking quarantine. Like in the sense that you're being exposed to other people and sharing space and breathing the same air. Happens at the grocery store, So, sorry, it's just a little bit of a mind fuck there, in terms of how some things are totally cool, like the people making your food in the restaurant that you pick up, and the potential of getting the virus like through your shoes, but like at the same time, like going to the grocery store is totally fine, like just wear your mask. Anyway, again, I digress. So I had a few people over, right? Like 2 people over or something that I've been seeing regularly. And those 2 people came over, and then the other person we have here came and joined us. So it's like a group of 5 or 6, and the frequency, like the energetic frequency from the time that it was just like 2 people to the time that it was like 6 people, just the energetic frequency like just changed, like magnified. Like the room itself felt like the better energy. It just felt like the energetic vibration had gone up. And it just made me think about the fact that like, wow, like what if a lot of what this is, if you just want to look at it from an alchemical perspective, and I personally am like a little obsessed with Isaac Newton and all of his alchemical stuff. So that's just like a whole separate other thing for me. But when you look at things from an alchemical perspective, you're going to see an energy as being everything, right? Like everything is energy, like everything. And if everything is energy and you're limiting people from having human interaction, which feeds us and feeds our spirits and keeps us optimistic and keeps us afloat and happy and nurtured and inspired and part of the human family, we're going to get really lonely in isolation. We're going to get really lonely in isolation, and we're going to get, it's like animals at the zoo that are locked in like little cages. So we're going to see so many mental health issues come out of this. And already I see people really struggling. So it's just a thought, but why would you want to limit positive energy or kind of cut down on people's ability to have that kind of create community and the energy that comes from community? And so I would just ask that people kind of ask themselves some deep questions and and look at all that and stay open. Stay open, everyone, always.